I was 7 years old when I kind of felt the calling, I guess, in the middle of the night. I got up out of my bunk bed, went and told my parents that I wanted to give my life to Christ. My father prayed with me, and I accepted Christ. From that time, I was up, down, all around. My parents divorced, my mom had remarried, different brothers born, and all of that. But I had always been raised by a loving Christian mom, and now loving Christian stepfather to pursue God and have him. I mean, I was in church every time the doors opened, pretty much as a kid. So,
and I grew up in a Christian home. I went to visit my grandmother one summer. I think I was about 8, and I went to Vacation Bible School, and I asked Jesus into my heart at that time, or I prayed the prayer, but I don't know that I fully understood, exactly what it meant to be a Christian at that point. So a few years later, I went to like a Christian camp with our church, and whenever they did the altar call at the end of the service, I was very shy, and I was very worried about what people would think about me. And I didn't want everybody that I went to church with to think that I wasn't a Christian. So the way they posed the question from the pulpit was, if you are not sure of your salvation, would you raise your hand? And so I felt comfortable, raising my hand in that situation. And so whenever they did the altar call, it sounds weird, but I felt like there was like a physical, push on my back to go forward. And I went forward, and again, I was very shy, so this lady from my church offered to pray with me, and I actually wanted her to pray the prayer herself instead of me, because I was just so shy about praying out loud in front of somebody and that sort of thing. But she was like, honey, this is something you have to do yourself. And so I prayed and accepted Jesus into my heart at that time, to where I felt like I really understood what I was doing. I was only probably 11 years old at that point, but I just felt very light, and just like a burden had been lifted off of my shoulders at that point.
do you want me to go?
I'll go, because I don't like your version of the story.
Well, I'm still sharing it, so go ahead.
We went to the same high school, but at different times.
Sure.
So I graduated, and he graduated the year after me, but
Which means I was 1 year younger.
Yes. His first year there was his senior year. So we went to the same high school, but not at the same times. So I graduated, and I was a freshman at Liberty University, and we had a mutual friend that introduced us, and that's how we met.
Yes. Okay, so the real version is we basically got to the point where she would stalk me. So she heard that I was a new kid in their school, and I only went there my senior year. And she would come home from college, and she would leave little notes on my little Honda CRX windshield, asking if I was in town or what I was doing or whatever. And so I figured I'd either call the police on her, or I would return her calls. And so eventually we started dating, and that's kind of how it really happened.
Yeah, I maybe left a note a couple of times. Not enough to institute a stalking charge. So.
Yeah, agreed. I was glad she did.
So he graduated, and that December he went into the Air Force. So we had gotten pretty serious by that point, and so we had to do the long distance thing, and we did that and dated for about a year. And he had come home one time he was on leave, and we got engaged, and we were engaged for about a year before we got married.
I never thought I would be a pastor. Never desired to be one. I kind of took the path that the Air Force had placed me on, been through several different careers, mostly in the medical field. And when I left the Air Force, after I retired in 2013, I just figured I would go that course the rest of my life. I worked in a hospital locally as a practice administrator, managing orthopedics and specialty practices. When I left the hospital to do that on my own, I created my own business and worked in partnership with another consulting firm to do it for private practices, what I thought would be forever. It was very lucrative, good money, I enjoyed it. And one day I pretty much had a tap on the shoulder in a board meeting, and the Lord just said very clearly, not out loud, but in my head, I want you to do this. I want you to to do what you do for a private business, to making them successful, managing the organization, the people, all of that. I want you to do that for me. And it was very specific that it was to be here with Pastor Bob Weed at Eagle's Nest. We had been going to Eagle's Nest since 2005, actually, off and on, because I was in the Air Force still. So we came here for a period of 6 years. After I was deployed to Iraq, came back, got promoted, moved to DC, so we couldn't come to church here. And then when we got back here in 2014, we've been going here ever since. It was kind of like a natural thing for us to come back to Eagle's Nest because we had a lot of connections from the time where I was stationed here before. But it wasn't like we had a calling or anything.
I wasn't so sure, whenever he first told me that, it sounded crazy. Like he came home and says, this is what I feel like God wants me to do. And I just, are you sure? And, just for 21 years, he had been in the Air Force. And so we knew, what that looked like. And we knew, you may have to move around some and that sort of thing, but there was structure with that. And when he first got out of the Air Force, it was a little scary because there were a few job changes. And there was even a time where he didn't have a job for like 2.5 months. That was super scary after having 21 years of consistency. So then we moved here, and he had several job changes even once we moved here. So to feel like, okay, now he's got his own type of consulting business, and this is probably it. And then for him to say, now I feel like I'm being called to go full-time at Eagle's Nest, and it was scary. It was scary at first, I won't lie, yeah.
Well, think of it from like what you saw in me. I know I still have a tendency to work a lot,
right?
But it is nowhere on the scale of what I was doing in business.
Right.
I mean, when I was doing 70, 80-hour work weeks.
Right.
So.
And when he was trying to do both, when he was on like the board here and the leadership team here, and he would have meetings here after he had worked all day at the other job, it was too much. And at the time it was scary, income-wise and that sort of thing, to think about giving up that position, to have the best of both worlds there. But it just wasn't worth it mentally. And just the time away from home. So looking back, it was scary, but God has provided everything that we needed for him to be here, and he loves it. That's the big thing. Like, he tells everybody, like our families, when they ask and that sort of thing, he absolutely loves his job. And that means the world just, for us as a family. We have 3 young adult children. We have our oldest daughter is Keely, she's 24, and then Zachary's 21, and Andrew's 18. And as far as our parenting journey, as many people have the same story of, it definitely being like a roller coaster ride and having ups and downs. I homeschooled all of the kids to some extent. I had this vision in my head of like, if we're a Christian family, we're gonna send our kids to church and all the activities in kids ministry and then youth ministry. And then I'm also, on top of all that, homeschooling them and teaching them from a Christian worldview and, teaching them the word, and it's gonna produce, this perfect child at the end of it. And we had our struggles, with each and every one of them in one way or the other.
Yeah, and our oldest, Kaylee, was probably the one that gave us the most run for our money. As we kind of moved through the difficulties, there were times where she questioned her faith. And so you look at each other as parents and you say, well, we were raised this way our whole lives. We've spent everything that we have to invest in them, to develop these relationships. But at the end of the day, they have to make the decision. They have to be okay with it, and they have to make it their own. And so it was really, for me, it was scary. Yeah, it was, as a dad, I'm looking at this and going, my goodness, my own daughter is maybe not gonna follow the Lord, and I don't know how to reconcile that.
I just kept feeling like, especially when we were going through the struggles with Keely, that he would say to me over and over, but do you trust me with her? And that was a really hard question to answer because I would jokingly say, well, I trust you, but I don't know that I trust her to allow you to speak to her and to work in her life and
to give in.
Right, and to surrender.
Our middle child, Zachary, our oldest son, he, like me, has a story where he struggled with anxiety, depression. His comes probably more from OCD, an obsessive kind of compulsive disorder, where if things don't go a certain way, like she mentioned, kind of is her wiring, it can throw him off sorts. And so he really struggled as a kid. And we just would pray with him, and he would claim, scripture verses and music, worship songs and things that we would pray over him. And it took years. It was something that we wanted to happen immediately. You're watching this kid in pain, kind of suffering, going through this, and he wants everything to be the right way, but he couldn't get past it.
For Zachary, that was gut-wrenchingly hard as a parent to watch your child that wants to just be a kid and do normal things struggle like he did with stuff. I was so proud of him because he would always still do the things, but he struggled greatly with anxiety doing just normal things that other kids do all the time. And through counseling and that sort of thing, we had to a lot of times be like tough love.
Kaylee was kind of walking off of a path on her own. Zach was struggling with his health issues, and then Andrew was just kind of a knucklehead. He's the wild card in our family. We had no idea what to expect with him. I remember a specific period of time in DC where I was mowing the grass and I was listening to my headphones, the live version of Kim Walker-Smith's I Still Believe. And I literally, I'm not even kidding you, cried. I just broke down. I had to stop the lawnmower and go in my garage because I was afraid my neighbors were going to think I was more crazy than I was. And I couldn't stop crying. And I remember praying to God that even though I see Kaylee's life going off course, and even though I see Zachary struggling with the things that he struggles with, and I'm not sure what you're going to do with Andrew, even still, I believe. I trust in you. And it was only because I was saying those words. It wasn't the things that I was seeing. It wasn't how I felt. I was really kind of distraught. And through all of it, looking back at just a short time ago, all three of them have just come around in such a way that only God could be given the credit for it.
With our daughter, she's serving the Lord now, and she's, just a great wife and a sweet mom. For Zachary, though, years ago, he wouldn't have thought that he'd be where he is today and be able to do the things that he's doing today with such confidence. And he's already been able to help other people that have struggled with similar things.
And then Andrew, he has just grown into someone that we love, we're proud of. He's so much mature than I was at his age. And it is such an amazing thing as a dad and a mom to say, well, we started off on this journey together, and it looks like we're going to finish the journey together. Everyone is pulling and doing their best to serve God. It
was such a refining time for us as parents, and for the kids as well. They, it's all part of our stories, and hopefully we can help other parents that are going through struggles with their kids. I don't want to tie up our whole story with a little neat bow and act like, we went through our time and now everything's, better.
Well, yeah, you still live with me. So good luck.